be interviewing Father Mark and what he's been doing with regards to trying to keep and communicate with his parish, both for Mass and for outside of Mass, parish needs and parish communications. So we're going to cut over to Father Mark. Here we go. Hi, Father Mark.
Hello, Rick.
Welcome.
Thanks for the chat.
Now, thanks for joining us and for your time giving up your time to join us now. This is a brief interview, and I'm hoping to effectively tease out what priests have been doing and some of the pros and cons with the new technologies with regards to the in face of the coronavirus. And so it's put a lot of pressure on parishes per se, and a lot of need for different technical expertise. So I'd like to ask Father Mark, now can you tell us a bit about you briefly so people know who you are and where you're from?
Sure, so thanks, Rick. My name is Fr Mark DeBattista. I'm a priest of the Diocese of Wollongong. I'm the administrator of St Patrick's Parish in Port Kembla, and I'm the Catholic chaplain to the University of Wollongong. I've done a number of different things. Been ordained for about 25 years, and everything from having 2 pastoral experiences and assignments over in the United States, 6 years studying scripture in Rome, and various other parish pastoral assignments. So it's always trying to find new ways of being more effective to communicate the Word of God, to bring the good news to people's lives, which is a demanding message, but a very much a joy-filled message that brings solution in time of uncertainty, hope in times of despair, and courage in times of weakness. So I'm really looking forward to this initiative from Rick about how we can make the best of the COVID-19 situation.
Yes, so tell us now, have you been live streaming any of your masses for your parish?
Well, I've certainly made use of the internet, but I haven't managed to do any live streaming yet. That may be on the cards at some stage, but when I discovered I had to get some extra software which I wasn't equipped for at the time, I decided to stick to filming and then uploading on YouTube and on Facebook as 2 separate platforms to, again, give a wide exposure as possible. And it has been quite successful. I mean, about 2 or 3 times the normal number who would come to Mass have actually been watching the Mass online. So it's been quite an unexpected result. And someone jokingly said to me, "Father, you should take the whole operation online." I said, "Yeah, that'd be nice, but how am I going to get this?" And we need people to be at Mass as well, not just to contribute donations and keep the parish afloat and keep the priest fat and healthy, or at least just fed, but to obviously to worship God and to actually be able to receive the sacraments.
Well done. Thanks, Father Mark. Now, I have to just let the viewers know that I am married to Father Mark's sister. So he's my brother-in-law, and I've tried to teach him what I can or have in the past. I haven't been very successful. He's taught me a lot, though. So now, tell us, Father Mark, in terms of, so you've had some struggles in terms of live streaming. So you then thought about doing a video record of your Mass and Masses for your parishioners?
Yes, because live streaming, I've done a lot of filming for the talks and my YouTube channel that I've had for just Sunday Masses with the Gospel and the homilies, and I realized there was and also the university talks and the catechist talks. I realized there's quite a market, so to speak, out there where people just want to read and be fed, and they're not always finding sources of nourishment, of church teaching, the sacred tradition. So I realized that people were hungry, and each week people are looking forward to hearing something from the scriptures. So that's I've done a lot of that, but I've never really done so much filming of the whole Mass, and that's brought with it its own challenges, because with the camera that I have, it's a very simple camera. It's called a Mevo camera. That might mean something to some of you, but it's basically like one of those circular microphones, or it's a circular microphone about probably 8 inches long, 2-inch diameter, and it sits nicely on a stand which I can adjust. The camera has a nice wide lens, and if you put it on full automatic, it can actually zoom in and out in 3 different shots. Not so much a zoom, I don't know what you call it, but it's got 3 different shots. Or you can fix it yourself for a zoom in on the closest possible shot, so it's actually on the priest, and people then at home can see you close up.
That's good. So is that a preset that's built into the camera and that you have to operate?
Well, you can actually set it yourself on full automatic pilot so that it follows faces and all of that, but then it goes from a close-up shot to a medium shot to a distant shot. And I had some feedback from other viewers on previous occasions that if I could focus it and limit it during the homily time to a close-up shot, that would be better, and the person online can feel that they're watching your facial expressions, which, as you can imagine, are critical when you're trying to convey a message through someone online and they don't have the benefit of touch and smell and feeling, but only 2 senses, audio and visual. So I've had to actually ask somebody, or find someone in the parish who could follow with the camera through the iPhone and actually zoom in, and that's worked pretty well, but it's been another challenge to try and cover the whole Mass.
Sure, and that's one of the things, like my role has been a multimedia designer. I've done lots of videos, videography, I've taught the whole gamut in terms of photography and video. So it's very familiar with me. And one thing I just wanted to point out to the viewers here is that you talked about the idea of having that option for a close-up, so that the viewers can feel like they're being engaged with you. And I think that's really it's an important thing, or important element, in terms of when priests are recording their masses, that they do have that. And I think in particular, when you're giving your homily, and especially at the Eucharist, the consecration. So these are 2 key moments that other times you can have the fuller shots, a more wider shot, but having that close up, it really is powerful. So it's good that they gave you some feedback, and you've adjusted that. Is that correct?
I have. I mean, with the masses, some masses I could do a little bit, because I've got my phone in my hand. The beautiful thing with the Mevo is that it actually shows what the camera can see through a little iPhone, and then you got the picture there. You can hold that in your hand. So I'm on the other side of the altar, the camera's watching me, and I can actually zoom in or expand it out just by sliding my fingers on the screen like that. I'm not sure if you can see it, and that actually allows the picture to be broadened or narrowed. For example, when we had the 3 readers during the Good Friday solemn commemoration of the Lord's Passion, we each had to be distant enough from each other for social distancing etiquette, but at the same time to have them all in the one shot.
Yes.
We didn't have the benefit of 3 separate cameras like you might have in a major production filming at the cathedral, where you can cut from this camera to that camera to the other one. So I just zoomed it as best I could, and it was a fixed shot, and the 3 of us then had to do our best together with those behind the screen to be as dramatic as possible, make the Passion come alive. But as you know, people sitting in the pew are not just focusing on one thing at a time. I mean, and maybe in the homily they're looking at the priest for a time, but then they may still be listening, but they're looking at the tabernacle because he says something about the Eucharist.
Yes.
Or, let's face it, they may be distracted momentarily, and or they might just, the priest is sitting down, but the camera is kind of on him, and then your eye goes back to the altar or to some other part of the church. So that's where, with one camera only, I have had limitations and just do the best I can.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I would like to dive into and a little bit deeper, not today, but in other interviews, and just that reality. So some of the technical issues or problems or constraints when it comes to filming the Mass. I mean, it's not the preferred way of having the Mass, but this is a pandemic, and we're trying to still communicate liturgy and the sacramental life, well, at least in terms of the Mass, and then being able to communicate with the parish. So tell me, Father Mark, you've also been doing some talks, is that correct, with some of your parishioners?
I have, Rick. One of the thoughts, usually a couple of times a year, at least Easter and Christmas, typically, I would do a pastoral message. Some priests I know would write something regularly in their bulletin. I would normally do that too, just to write my pastoral message in the bulletin. But this time round, I thought it would be better, again, to do something in the form of an audio visual, again, for the sake, simple advantage or benefit that they could see my face and hear my voice giving them the message. And a picture does tell 1,000 words, as the old saying goes, and there's a sense that I can actually add the tone that I wish to convey in my Easter message this time round. But in addition to that, I've also taken to provide a little weekly message, and again, 3 to 4 minutes, audio visual, just chatting about anything, not so much about the gospel or the readings, but just a message from me to them as my parishioners, so they get the feeling that I'm trying to reach out with them in their home during this time when I cannot see them, talk to them, touch them, shake their hands, so forth, as I would normally do each week. At least now they hear a message from me that's from the heart, and trying to really keep my people united and focused and uplifted at this time.
Thank you. It's one of my concerns too, is that we're okay. It's one thing to be able to record the Mass and have that either live streamed if you've got the technical know-how and the persons to be able to help pull it off. But what's happening in terms of parish life? I mean, it's very difficult if you're not keeping in conversation. I mean, it's a relationship that needs to be fostered, and if the parish is not engaging with their parishioners, they say it takes 6 to 8 weeks to form a habit, and I think one of the concerns and dangers is, from my point of view, is with a lack of communication and a lack of the ability to interact as we normally would, is a fall off from the church, a disconnect. And one of the things that I've seen in terms of some of the programs like Catholics Come Home with Tom Peterson in the US, he's a lot of the people that have when they've recorded their message, their testimonial is that they moved to an area, they didn't know where the church was, they didn't know the parishes, they sort of missed Mass once, they've missed it twice, and then it's just an easy thing to slip into. It wasn't deliberate, but it's just something that can just fall upon us without the obligation of going to Mass now, obviously in the light of the pandemic. But so your initiatives there, and if you had any feedback with regards to your reaching out to your parishioners.
Yes, actually, there's obviously a lot more that can come, but I have had some feedback, and quite interesting feedback. Overall, it's been an overwhelming positive response when the parishioners see that the masses have been online, particularly the Easter ceremonies, where we've had hundreds of hits. I haven't taken the actual statistics or the analytics of it all, but and we don't have a big parish, so it's been an overwhelmingly positive response. Granted that at Easter time and as at Christmas time, people do come who are visiting really for Easter and are not normally active participants or active parishioners. That being said then, from those who are regular parishioners, there's been an attempt, for instance, not only to respond to the online activity, but some parishioners have also taken very much to heart that they'll come and pick up printed copies, for instance, of the bulletin. We know that the internet reaches many people, but it doesn't reach everybody. There are those elderly who, because of age, just the technology has passed them, and so they feel even more isolated.
Yes.
One woman came out in one of the station churches and said, "This is the first time I've been out since Mass last week." She came to Mass that Sunday. She didn't know what else had happened. The bishops, some of them had decided to not have Masses on the Sunday. Others were still going. The government hadn't yet finalized things. Mm-hmm. But she found out when she came to church that Sunday that there wasn't Mass on that day. So we ended up having a adoration, Eucharistic adoration, exposition, with benediction at the end, but we could only do that for one Sunday. Then it became definite. So we've got a couple of people who actually take around hard copies of the bulletin and drop them off to those people to again keep them connected in some way. The other thing, sad, some people are beginning to suffer from cabin fever, and one person recently said to me that pray for me because I'm beginning to lose a bit of faith. Again, not being able to come to Mass and to participate. Now, she's been a very avid watcher of all the ceremonies online, but it's just a realization that not everything can be imitated, can be compensated for. Some things we've really just got to ask the Lord, you've got to do this yourself and keep people focused, because I can't do any more. And that's ultimately what we have to keep in mind. And that's why in my recent message to them, I said to them, pray for the grace to not get used to watching Mass online. Yeah. Pray for the day when you can come back to Mass and worship together around the altar in that physical presence with one another.
That's so true, and it's so powerful. This is a time we don't know how long this is going to last. Hopefully, in Australia, we can probably work towards a closer or a sooner finish than perhaps other places around the world.
Hope so.
But we do need to pray for that. And now, in terms of your the recording of the Masses themselves, can you tell us some benefits and some pros and some cons as a result of videoing your Mass for your parishioners?
Well, the first week, we're constantly learning, and each week we try to improve a little bit from the previous one. Whether it's simply recognizing that a Mass with just a cappella singing is not as good as having a live organist there. And then having music with live organ and live music is actually better still when you've got a cantor. Fortunately for us, the government has recognized this and modified its restrictions and allowed up to 10 people to be together for a live streaming Mass, which has enabled us really to have a richer liturgy, filming it. And I've always been very grateful to those who have helped me, particularly at the Easter Vigil when we needed extra helpers, because they are really, we together are all providing a service for those at home. And what's become poignantly or painfully more obvious to me is that in normal liturgy, granted that there's no perfect liturgy except in heaven, in normal liturgy there's always little glitches here and there, little mishaps. Somebody kicks the bell over, somebody comes up and nearly trips over the step, whatever. The priest turns around and cleans up something else, and people chuckle and it's forgotten 5 minutes later, and then someone reminds you after Mass. But when you're videoing it all and trying to capture a sense of the sacred and so forth, you've got to be very mindful of those goof-ups that happen unintentionally, right?
Yep.
But they do happen sometimes, and that's the reality of parish life. So each week we've tried to get a little bit better, and even, for instance, one Mass, we had the camera pointed in a particular angle, and there was a lot of light coming in the background from the sun, which was, it didn't quite make it look like I had a halo around my head, but it made me invisible, so you couldn't see my face. As a result, you couldn't see the expression on my face, which then took something away from the message of the homily.
Yes.
So again, they're things that nobody else watching there would have recognized, but people watching and restricted now from the information that comes to us from 5 senses to 2, you start to put a whole lot of eggs into those 2 baskets. And so it's trying to think in an unusual way. It's not our normal way of thinking, and I've become much more mindful of that when I'm filming these Masses.
Yeah, like one thing we've had to do is you reposition the Paschal candle that's been next to the lectern during the octave especially, but just to face the camera. Now, it normally wouldn't face that way, but
Yes.
it's adjusting these things so that the people at home can actually see everything as it should be. But it means that it's slight adjustments in terms of the sacristy, in terms of what you're doing and planning, preparation, your flowers, your lighting. So the key light from the sun outside is way more powerful than the lights inside. So your camera, it's going to have some problems adjusting to that light. And what have you found with regards to audio?
The audio, I was going to say something on that. With the audio, again, it's become very important to me as I'm talking to those in front of me, it felt quite challenging and difficult to have 3 or 4 people in front of me, and I'm trying to preach a homily that has a crescendo to it or some dynamism with 3 or 4 people, and not seem as if I'm just focusing too much on them and just on you, and it just becomes, with a small group, you tend to preach, at least for me, preach a bit differently. With a larger group, you can look around, you can span the whole congregation, but now I'm trying to look at home. So it's keeping in mind that there's a small congregation in front of me, but a much larger audience at home. But it doesn't stop there, because the larger audience at home is not all experiencing this together. So it's a large audience as a compilation or a sum total of a whole lot of smaller ones, whether it's 1 or 5 people in a family watching around the lounge, and their cat, they told me, was watching the Mass as well. So you've got that, or you've just got one person watching. But it's multiples of small groups together that give that overall effect. Now, that is something that cannot be replicated in online. That is an experience that you can only have when you are physically gathered there. So that is something that really we cannot duplicate during this period. And that's why we should pray for a speedy return to normality, so that we can pray shoulder to shoulder, even if we have to keep some social distancing for the end of the year potentially, then at least we have that. But to help me keep in mind that I'm talking to people at home, I find during the Mass, when I'm giving directives, I'm often talking to the people at home. through the other side of the camera. So, those of you watching at home, and if I'm making a point, and for those at home, so that those at home realize, I'm actually talking to them as they're watching 50 minutes, an hour, however long it happens to be. And then at the point of communion, I make a deliberate sort of point to stop and remind them this is the time to make a spiritual act of communion, or an act of spiritual communion, expressing a desire to receive Jesus Christ spiritually, because you can't receive him sacramentally at this time. So that has been a very helpful thing from the audio perspective.
Yes, and I think this shift with regards to not being able to go to church and to mass to receive the sacraments, it's a real, I think it's an opportunity for us to look at worshipping in truth and in spirit. It's a deeper call to, okay, what is it that we're doing? This isn't the norm, but this is a chance for us to recollect ourselves. And in terms of the viewers, but your parishioners, I should say, and watching from home, do you have any messages before your mass starts, or things like that, just to help them perhaps not watch in their pajamas or whatever the case may be, maybe having a cup of coffee?
Sure. I haven't said that to them so much at the beginning of Mass, but during the introductory remarks, as a priest is able to make, typically I've made very explicit mention of those who are watching this at home, and trying to draw them into the mood, the spirit of the liturgy on that day. During my pastoral message last Sunday, I did place a lot of emphasis on the importance of having a routine. A routine helps order in the day. It helps a sense of before and after. We look forward to things that are coming if we don't have proper distinctions between the day. And then I even mentioned having a separate routine for Sunday. And again, that might fit into what you're talking about out there, where it's important, just for the sake of the Lord's Day, to maybe get dressed up a bit. You're not leaving the house, but get dressed up regardless, Put on some shoes, brush your hair, make sure you get yourself in the best possible frame of mind so that you can benefit to the maximum degree possible from the experience, albeit limited, that someone is getting online. And I feel this also taps into very much with those who are coming to Mass on a Sunday. Because of the culture that we're in, typically I feel that many people come to Mass who maybe subconsciously or unconsciously adopt the attitude, impact on me, impress me, move me, entertain me maybe. But that is actually a misunderstanding of what liturgy is. Liturgy comes from two Greek words, leit ergon, which means public worship. It's the duty on the public, we as the body of Christ, to come and worship God. And then God blesses us in return in countless ways, not least of which through his word and through his body. So if there is that kind of attitude when a person is normally attending Mass, then how much more are they at risk of falling into that attitude when they're sitting at home in their lounge room, on their lounge, comfortable, and watching Mass at home in their normal parish church. So that is something to really think about, and to make sure, I think, those at home who are watching that way, to make that special effort for the Sunday Mass as a way of keeping the Lord's holy, by doing those extra sacrifices, going that extra mile, and in so doing, they prepare their spirit for the grace that God wants to give them.
That's so true. It's so powerful, and we need these, because it's so easy to slip into ways. This is uncharted territory, uncharted times, and so it's good to have those protocols and just reminders. So vocalizing it and just communicating that, it's an important thing for the parish priest or the administrator, to communicate these things and to keep that on a regular basis, so that they're keeping in contact, and that relationship is being fostered as well. Tell me, Father Mark, in terms of some of the cons, in terms of the disadvantages or the negative factors in terms of videoing the Mass, videoing your messages, what have been some negatives or not so favourable things about having to video and edit, etc.?
Well, the cons of having to film and putting masses online is the fact that this is not the norm. It's a copy of what we normally do. So with a copy, and it's not even a great copy, it doesn't create the same experience. Although I must say, one of the comments, the feedback was about the Stations of the Cross, or Stations of the Cross, or the evening Mass, or the Lord's Supper. They said to me, by the end of the ceremony, they felt as though they were in the church with me. And I said, thank you for saying that, because that's a beautiful comment and feedback for me, that's exactly what I was trying to create for those at home. Now, it doesn't always, and I'm not naive enough to think that it always creates that same effect. When you're moving a camera, for example, do your best, whoever's filming like me is a bit of a lone ranger, but although I must say I've had now a few people in the parish, and one fellow is particularly good, and he actually moves the camera along on the screen on my phone, so that it's zooming and it's as if someone is actually following me around, which does use more data, but that's okay. It comes out with a better footage. Mm-hmm. So that's improved a lot. But make sure, for instance, if you don't have that, or even if you do, don't bump the camera, because the world of the viewer just shakes, and it's an earthquake, and then they're all dizzy. So you don't want to do that. If you do have to turn the camera, again, I only speak in my own case, just moving it very slowly. Again, bearing in mind somebody's looking at this through the other side of a camera. It's not just a simple reflex action of the eyes, and they quickly adjust. And if the filming is done well, as professionally or as maturely, as technically sound as possible, then those at home are more likely to enjoy watching the Mass, and it becomes or changes from simply a movie to an experience, which is what I want them to have. Granted that it's a very limited experience. So there are some cons. The sound in the background, with the statements, the pastoral messages. One, I put some sound in the background, and again, it took quite a bit of playing around. We were playing sound through the speaker system in the church, and that was, again, we had to practice, because the music itself had a crescendo in it. So you want it loud enough so you can hear it, but not so loud that when it crescendos, it drowns me out. So that was another challenge there. Another Mass message, I didn't have sound. And the background as well, trying to maybe look at a different place. So again, creates a sense of anticipation for those watching at home. Where will he film this week from, the pastoral message? When it comes to the church, well, obviously I've got two churches, I'm fortunate enough, I try to alternate it so that those people who would ordinarily come to one church or the other, again, would feel a connection with their church. So my aim is always trying to get them to feel a connection with something of the place, the sacred worship place, the parish land, that kind of thing. And also, this happened around Easter time. When we were filming, it was rather late. So at midnight, I was still in the church doing some filming. And as you can imagine, you're probably chuckling at home. But when you're filming and trying to do something serious, late at night, your brain isn't functioning at its optimal capacity. So you're more likely to make mistakes. So if you can do it during the day, that's better still.
Sure. Now, one thing that's just come to memory, I know you served over in the US for a few years. What was your role there?
I had two pastoral assignments. One was as a spiritual director and chaplaincy at the University of Illinois with the St. John's Catholic Chapel, which was part of the Newman Foundation. And the other one was as the National Chaplain for Focus, that was in Colorado. So the first assignment was in Illinois, and then the second assignment was in Colorado, under Archbishop Chaput was my bishop at that time, and in Illinois, Bishop Daniel Jenke. Yeah.
One thing I remember talked to you all those years ago, but talking about how, in terms of your first appointment with regards to the university students there, they changed the mass times there. Do you recall that conversation?
I do, yes, because the students had the students effectively, there were about 40,000 students, that's including the graduate, postgraduate students in Illinois at the time. The university was, there were two towns, Champaign, different from the stuff you drink, but that was the main town, and then Urbana was the other. So that was when all the students were there were 100,000 people. When the students went off on holidays, it went down to 60,000. So that's a huge reduction, 40% reduction in your population. You can imagine what that does to the economy and all of that sort of thing. So it's really, it's what they call a university town. And when you have a university town, it's not just the economy that's affected by the university. It's almost as if the time zone is different. And what I mean by that, for those watching this, it's a real, the fact that students often came alive and stuff.
Sorry, we've just lost you there, Father Mark. Not sure if you can hear us. Sorry, we've got a freeze frame now. Hopefully we'll get you back in just a moment.
Losing and snoring away.
Sorry,
so
we just had a pause. We lost you for about you're talking about the economy, the importance of the economy of the students.
Shall I start again?
Yeah, just from about that point.
Yeah. So the fact of having a university town is not just affects the economy of those towns. Rather, it's like a different time zone. Not so much for the professors and people in the town who are not employed with the university, but for the students very much so. Mm-hmm. Many of the students would start to come alive in terms of their study habits at 11 p.m. They're coming down to study, and they're staying there until 2 or 3 a.m. Mm. I remember asking one of them, and Mary was her name, and she said, yeah, I'll study till about 3. And then I said, when do you get up in the morning? And then she said, about 10:30. So she's getting, 7.5 hours sleep, and which is okay, that's fine.
This is a little bit different.
The thing is, it's like a time zone change. You're 3 hours different. And that means so that's the kind of adjustment. Now, that is also reflected in a chaplaincy. We had a very vibrant chaplaincy there. We reflected that in the mass times. We used to have a mass that was 7 a.m. for the early morning crowd, which was quite small. But then we had, after a while, we had masses at noon as well, and that was always very well attended. This is a chaplaincy that had about 2,000 students there at mass every Sunday. We had 7 masses in total. Amazing. It's just unheard of in Australia. Mm-hmm. But the average, and you look out there, and there's all these black and brown-haired and blonde-haired people, but the average age of the mass was about 24. And the only reason it wasn't lower is because there were a couple of 63-year-old professors who loved to come to mass with the young ones and just be energized by them. So this is, again, that point I was making earlier about nothing beats being together with other people in that physical proximity for mass. So having said that, though, we then had masses sometime in the in the afternoon, late afternoon, and then he even started having masses at night at 9 p.m. The most well-attended mass on a Sunday, the masses started 9 a.m. in Spanish. Then we had a 10:30 mass, noon mass. We had a 4 p.m. mass, 6 p.m. mass, and a 9 p.m. mass. The 9 p.m. mass was always the best attended of all the masses. They each had a choir, and we had our choir director had a PhD in music. So we were very well resourced. So it was an unbelievably beautiful and privileged situation in which to work. But that evening, time was actually very, very effective. And I know other campuses had masses that started at 10 p.m., for instance. And they, again, but those priests had to live the same kind of life as the students. So a particular priest there, who was at one particular chaplaincy, and he used to say to me when I visited him that mass is at 10 p.m., it finishes whatever 10:30. By the time you hang out with the students a bit, say a few prayers after mass, and then go home, unwind, he's going to bed at 2. But then he's waking up at 10. So he's getting his 8 hours sleep, and that's the adjustment. That's what I mean by you're living in a kind of different time zone. So who knows if something like that will be called for during this time of pandemic, depending on how long it will last. But I'm certainly happy to explore that if it's required or proves promising.
That's one of the things, and that's the reason why I actually asked you that question, because I do recall that as you talked about it, and I remember it just being an amazing thing to think that there was mass at 9 p.m. and 10 p.m. I mean, that was just, but once you know the circumstance, then it made sense. And so I'm just thinking, and it might be something for our fellow priests and parishioners to be aware of, and that is, if you're live streaming your mass, having a different time for that live stream mass may be something to consider for your parish, depending on their parish needs. It's just something to factor in light of the pandemic, and just hearing that experience with the students at the university life. So it's something there to perhaps think about and explore if you are live streaming mass or any other type of parish communication. Thanks very much for your time, Father Mark. Is there anything else that if you'd had anything to comment on, or just to share with our viewers as a final comment?
Sure. Just on that last point, that was one of the concerns I had with the filming of the Easter ceremonies, because I wasn't doing it live streamed. Therefore, the filming or the ceremonies had to be done earlier, filmed, so that we would allow ourselves enough time to edit and then upload, and then have them available online more or less at the normal times when they would be participating. Now, needless to say, we didn't always make those time slots because unforeseen things were presented themselves. But it made it the busiest Easter I have in almost my entire life, 25 years as a priest. So because we were filming the ceremonies earlier, and then all the extra work of editing and uploading. So that was certainly an adjustment. And it felt funny, personally, for me, spirituality-wise, to celebrate the Lord's Passion at 1 p.m. Instead of 3 p.m. So psychologically, it's you have to adjust. You're thinking about the future, and so you're trying to have a mindset of the future, but you're doing it now. And that's just it's a constant thing. If I'm giving a message on Tuesday, but it's actually for the following week, I somehow have to get myself into that frame of mind, which is quite a challenge, because the circumstances are not so, and the context is not so immediate. You're actually somewhat removed from it. And that is an adjustment. I can't put it any other way. Yeah,
there's going to be new adjustments, new protocols in trying to travel this uncharted territory, and so there'll be some new things and technologies, and people's skills and talents need to come to the forefront in terms of parish life to help some of this come to fruition. Father Mark, thank you very much for your time. I think we've gone a bit over time, but I was only hoping for half an hour. 45 minutes we've got so far. So
I must say, this has nothing to do with the online, but at the end of each Mass, I always say to those watching at home, those of you who are not receiving our electronic bulletin and would like to, please respond to this video and with your contact details so that we could put you on our list. And then I let it know on the parish bulletin that our parish office has remained open because some people, again, just feel that need to come and physically be present and just talk to the parish secretary or the pastoral associate there, or if I'm there at the time, and while we observe our social distancing, again, it's that conversation with someone whom they ordinarily would have seen on a Sunday. And so while they bring their whatever planned giving envelope.
I think we've lost you once again, Father Mark. Seems to have paused.
And then later, at least for prayer, even if not until sometime a bit later when we can resume our.
Thank you. We did lose you a little bit there, but we did hear that it's important for the people to come and visit. You've kept the office, your parish office, open.
It's open.
Just to make sure, obviously keeping in mind all of the legal requirements, but it's still possible to meet if you needed to for personal needs.
Yes.
All right, but thank you once again, Father Mark, for your time, and I'll say good night and God bless.
Thank you.
Could you give us your blessing, Father?
Sure. To all those at home, Lord, you know who they are, who's watching. Be with them at this time. Console them in their any difficulties that they may be having. Strengthen their faith always and enrich them. Make them know how precious they are to you and that they are your beloved sons and daughters. May Almighty God bless you all, the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Amen.
Thank you so much, Father Mark, once again.
Thank you, Rick.
Good night.
Bye-bye.